During my wife's work party, my wife's boss approached me and said, "Tomorrow, your wife will go on vacation with me. I don't need your permission because your wife agreed already." My wife smirked. "I agree." I left the room and came back with something in my hands, and everyone fell silent. What happened next turned the party into a living nightmare. Too much perfume, too many fake smiles, and free wine that tasted like expensive regret. I showed up in a suit that had seen better depositions, nodded at people whose names I'd pretend to remember, and tried to enjoy the hors d'oeuvres like a man auditioning for normality. Mara looked stunning in a way that could still make my chest do that dumb, nostalgic flip, until she smiled at Anthony Reeves like he'd invented oxygen. Anthony Reeves is the kind of man who thinks charisma is a megaphone and mercy is a corporate perk. He laughs loud enough for his ego to echo off the glass walls and smells like the million-dollar confidence you can't buy unless you already have the wrong kind of money. He clinked his glass. The sound ricocheted like a starter pistol, and announced to the room with the casual arrogance of a man who believes other people's lives are open source, "Tomorrow, your wife will go on vacation with me. I don't need your permission because she already agreed." The air stopped being air for a beat. People froze like they'd accidentally walked into a taut comedy sketch that turned dark. Some people tittered nervously, like someone had asked them to clap on cue. Others stared as if they'd seen a car wreck in slow motion and were trying to find their phones to record the aftermath. Mara smirked, which is what made my smile curdle inside and turn into something colder. "I agree," she said, the words falling soft but precise, like someone pressing an elevator button for the floor you don't want to go to. I excused myself because habit had taught me that immediate reaction is often the worst kind of reaction. Walking away can be a strategy if you plan to come back smarter. Outside the party, the night smelled like rain waiting to happen and the kind of freedom people advertise in motivational posters. Fake, glossy, and oddly far away. I stood for a minute, breathed, and told myself a sentence I would eventually use as a thesis. If they wanted to make my life a joke, I'd make sure they remembered the punchline. I went back in with the measured calm of a man who'd been given a second in which to plot. I went back in with a pocket full of patience and a head full of plans. The room was a circus of pretense. People in expensive clothes pretending that nerves were just seasonal allergies. I walked back in, and instead of the passive, wounded guy they expected me to be, I had a sleek black folder in my hands. You could feel curiosity ripple through the crowd like static electricity. Anthony, red-faced with the kind of certainty that looks good on a mug but terrible on a resume, asked me what the folder was like he could charm the answer out of me. I smiled like a man who had already rehearsed the silence he would use as a weapon and set the folder down in front of him. He opened it with a practiced air of showman confidence, and for the first time that night his face, normally set to broadcast mode, gave a private performance of panic. Inside the folder were things you don't find in official press releases. Invoices to shell companies, signed receipts with his handwriting linking him to accounts overseas, screenshots of promises that read more like blackmail than romance. It's funny how power looks when you expose the levers. Cheap and ridiculous. The projector, set up earlier to play slick company highlight reels, had this curious talent for reflecting embarrassment, and someone, somewhere, had cued the wrong clip. Instead of smiling team-building slides, the screen filled with footage, Anthony and Mara in settings that were not conference rooms. There were texts, calendar invites, and photos with timestamps that conveniently matched business trips he'd approved and she'd mentioned. You could hear an audible gulp of disbelief slide across the assembled faces like a bad drink being swallowed. Phones came out, of course. Everyone wants to be the first one to have witnessed the fall of someone taller. You can't stop viral content once it decides it's going to be viral. It behaves like a toddler with a microphone. Anthony lunged for the projector with more reflex than sense, hands awkward and desperate. But there's a very particular rule in modern public humiliation. Once a truth starts playing on the big screen, it doesn't care for ego. I leaned in close enough to hear him mutter excuses that sounded like rehearsed confessions. Misplaced trust, corporate pressures, poor judgment. Words people use when they want to keep their dignity but don't want to fix anything. Mara, mascara feathering at the corners, looked stunned at first, then furious, then small in a way that made the room uncomfortable. Some people clutched their napkins like rosaries, as if faith could save reputation. A few whispered, "Oh my God, the preferred modern liturgy." Someone called for security, because when you're on the losing end of a power play, you always want someone with an ID badge to fix your mess. Meanwhile, I felt no urge to dramatize my victory. This wasn't revenge porn. This was a curated demonstration of consequence, and consequence is quieter than people expect. I had done the boring, annoying work that doesn't look good on Instagram. Hidden accounts traced, messages archived, a friend in IT who owed me more than a favor and mirrored server logs like a saint. I'd watched patterns, stitched together receipts, and turned gossip into something a judge could appreciate. The board, who'd been clapping earlier at Anthony's so-called vision, now had their phones out, not to applaud, but to call for a board meeting and possibly legal counsel. People who pretended to be loyal left the room faster than free food at the end of a conference. Anthony's career deflated in stages. First, disbelief, then rage, then the kind of pleading a reserve for toddlers and bad-forgotten pets. Mara tried to follow me out, mascara tracks marking the trail of someone who understood too late how thin apologies are in public. "Jonah, please," she said, the name sounding small, like a note someone squeezed through a slot. I handed her an envelope instead of a hug. Inside were papers I'd had drafted by a weary lawyer friend. Separation terms, logistics, a line so clear it looked like a horizon. No reconciliation. "You made your choice public," I told her, and it was true. There was no restoring privacy after this kind of exposure. People would later call me ruthless. Some would call me a legend. My favorite was when some intern tweeted a joke that went semi-viral calling me the guy who turned HR into TMZ. Months later, Anthony would lose his job, his house, and the myths he'd told himself were real. Mara would leave the city like a stain being removed from a shirt, visible from a distance, gone up close. I walked home that night with nothing but a calmer heartbeat and the peculiar, quiet glow of someone who had learned that silence isn't always surrender. Sometimes it's the sound of your plan loading. Before my life turned into a public service announcement about betrayal, Mara and I actually had something good, or at least, I thought we did. You know that early phase of love when you're dumb enough to think laughter can pay bills and kisses can fix credit scores? That was us. She was working 2 jobs when I met her. One at a coffee shop, another at a clothing store that smelled like teenage insecurity and cheap perfume. I'd stop by both just to see her. At the coffee shop, she'd hand me lattes with hearts drawn in the foam like she invented love itself. At the clothing store, she'd roll her eyes at entitled customers while whispering, "If I ever get rich, I'm buying this whole place just to fire everyone." It was ambition wrapped in eyeliner, and I was hooked. Mara was all sharp edges and soft laughs. She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic. When she talked, you listened. When she smiled, you forgot the rent was due. I was working as a junior project analyst back then, translation, human spreadsheet. My biggest expense was pretending to have hobbies. But when I saw her struggling with her car one evening, hood up, frustration written all over her face, I pulled over like some broke superhero. I didn't even know how to fix it. I just wanted to look useful. 20 minutes, 3 YouTube tutorials, and 1 burnt finger later, the engine started. She called me her miracle worker. I called her the reason I stopped caring that my shirt smelled like engine grease. That's how it started. Simple, messy, kind of perfect. We dated through late-night study sessions, cheap diners, and moments that felt cinematic in the we can't afford real movies kind of way. When she got into grad school, she cried and said she couldn't do it without me. I believed her. I paid her tuition in installments that my wallet still sends me hate mail about. I bought her books, helped her study, and learned that supporting someone's dreams sometimes means watching your own fade quietly in the background. But I didn't mind. I thought that's what love was, equal parts sacrifice and optimism. We got married after she graduated. It wasn't fancy, just a courthouse wedding, her in a cream dress, me in a borrowed suit. Our vows were simple. She promised never to let ambition change her, and I promised to always believe in her. Yeah, irony aged that one like milk. The early years were good. We built a life with mismatched furniture and a lot of laughter. We celebrated promotions with takeout and anniversaries with coupons. We were a team, or so I thought. I was proud of her, even when she started outpacing me career-wise. She had that hunger, the kind that makes recruiters drool. When she landed her job at Brookstone Dynamics, she called me crying. Jonah, they picked me. They actually picked me. We opened champagne that cost less than gas that night and toasted to the future. I didn't realize I was cheering for the version of her that would eventually forget me. At first, she'd come home talking about her projects, her coworkers, her ideas. Then came the names, Anthony this, Anthony that. Her new boss, the visionary. The guy who apparently could change an industry with one email. He was older, smooth-talking, and full of stories about grind culture and leadership mindsets. I met him once at a company mixer. He shook my hand, looked me in the eye, and said, "So you're the man behind the woman, huh?" I should have known right then he was the type who collected people like business cards. He wore a Rolex that looked like it had an ego problem and had that tone of voice that made every sentence sound like a TED Talk that went on too long. Mara admired him. I could see it in the way she straightened her posture when he walked by, how her voice got that polished, professional lilt she never used with me. I told myself it was just respect. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Then came the wardrobe changes. Suddenly, she was dressing like LinkedIn made her its cover model. Tailored blazers, heels sharp enough to cut glass, perfumes I couldn't pronounce. I complimented her once, and she said, "It's important to look the part." I didn't realize she meant his part. Our dinners became silent PowerPoint presentations. I'd ask how her day was, and she'd answer in slides. Busy, productive, tired. I'd try to make jokes, and she'd smile like laughter was a subscription she'd canceled. My wife. This woman who once danced barefoot in our living room to 80s love songs, now scheduled intimacy like it was a dentist appointment. The first real crack showed when she started working late. The first night, I believed her. The second night, I sent her dinner via delivery app because I was trying to be thoughtful. The driver called me back and said, "Sir, no one with that name works here after 6. That was my first red flag, waving proudly while I ignored it like an idiot. When I brought it up, she laughed. "Jonah, don't be paranoid. We were at an off-site meeting." Right. Because every off-site meeting comes with lipstick stains on your blazer collar and texts that disappear faster than Snapchat ghosts. I told myself she was just stressed, that maybe the job had gotten to her, that maybe I wasn't being supportive enough. Love makes you soft. It turns warning signs into misunderstandings and betrayal into maybe I'm overreacting. I used to look at her and remember all the times we had each other's backs, all the times she swore she'd never be like her mom, who left her dad for a wealthier guy when things got hard. I remember her crying in my arms once, saying, "I'll never do to you what she did to him." And I believed her. God, I believed her. The shift wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like erosion. One day she stopped asking me how work was. Another day she forgot to call when she got home. Soon, I was just a background character in her career montage. We'd sit in the same room, but live in different worlds. She'd scroll through emails while I pretended not to notice. We'd go to bed and she'd face the other way. When I asked if something was wrong, she said, "You've changed." Classic projection move. I wanted to fight for us, but how do you fight for someone who's already decided the battle's not worth it? Then one night, she came home buzzing, glowing, even. "Anthony nominated me for the Leadership Summit in Cancun," she said, excitement dripping off her words. I congratulated her, trying not to choke on the irony that she'd just accepted an all-expense-paid tropical vacation with the man I'd started to suspect was her emotional, and maybe physical, vacation from me. "You're not mad, right?" she asked, reading my hesitation. "It's just professional." Professional? Sure. Nothing screams career growth like sharing margaritas under a moonlit sky with your married boss. I laughed. "Of course not," I said. "Have fun learning about leadership." She smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "You're the best husband." I felt like the best fool. Over the next weeks, I tried to be chill, supportive, mature. You know, the 3 stages of denial. But every little thing started to itch. Her phone suddenly had a password. Her laughter when she texted became the kind of laugh that didn't belong to me anymore. She'd hum while getting ready for work, wearing perfume I'd never bought and clothes I'd never seen. Our bed started to smell faintly like her new world. Perfume, ambition, and betrayal. I told myself to trust her. But trust feels a lot like waiting for a lie to confess itself. One night, Lucas, my best friend since college, now a tech guy with a moral compass slightly south of legal, came over. He took one look at me and said, "You look like a man trying to solve an emotional murder without evidence." I laughed. "Feels accurate." He nodded, grabbed a beer, and said, "Want me to help you get proof?" I told him no at first. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband digging for ghosts. But as Mara's absences grew and her explanations got thinner, the line between sanity and stupidity started to blur. Lucas shrugged. "Your call, man. But just remember, truth's like a bad roommate. You can ignore it, but it's not leaving." Back then, I wasn't ready for truth. I still clung to the version of her who fell asleep on my shoulder during Netflix nights, who once wrote me sticky notes that said, "You've got this," before big meetings. I kept replaying the highlight reel of us, hoping it would drown out the horror movie currently airing in my gut. I told myself, she's just stressed. It's just work. But deep down I knew. You always know. Love doesn't vanish. It mutates. It turns into politeness, into silence, into pretending that someone's smile doesn't hurt you anymore. If someone had told me then that Mara would one day look me in the eye and say, "I agree," when another man joked about taking her on vacation, I'd have laughed in disbelief. But here's the thing about disbelief. It's just belief with bad timing. I wasn't ready to see her as the person she was becoming. I was still in love with the woman I met at the coffee shop, the one who smelled like vanilla creamer and ambition, who once told me, "You make me feel safe." I didn't realize I'd built a fortress around someone who was already digging a tunnel out. Looking back, the warning signs weren't subtle. They were fireworks. But I was too busy covering my ears, pretending the noise was music. Maybe love makes fools of us all. Or maybe it just hands you the rope and lets you tie your own noose. Either way, that's when I learned something that would guide every decision after. Love without respect isn't love, it's worship. And worship always ends with a fall. That night, after she went to bed, I sat on the couch with the lights off, scrolling through old photos on my phone. Our wedding, our road trips, her graduation. I stared at her smile and thought, "Where did you go?" But the truth is, she didn't disappear overnight. She just stopped coming home emotionally long before she stopped coming home physically. I just didn't notice until it was too late. The slow unraveling disguised as success. Mara was moving up, and I was watching from the sidelines, clapping like an idiot at my own replacement. You know how people say hindsight is 20/20? Yeah, mine came with surround sound and a strong smell of betrayal in designer perfume. Looking back, the signs weren't subtle. They were basically waving neon lights and yelling, "Hey Jonah, you're married to a walking red flag." But love makes you allergic to logic. It starts small: missed dinners, new passwords, more time at the office. At first, I didn't question it. I mean, Mara had always been ambitious, driven, laser-focused on success. That was part of what I loved about her. But lately, her drive came with accessories, new handbags, new perfume, and new lies that even a soap opera would reject for being too dramatic. The first real red flag arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. I'd just finished watching a documentary about billionaires pretending to be relatable when her phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, I wouldn't touch it, but curiosity is a drug that doesn't need a prescription. The screen lit up with a name I recognized, Anthony Reeves. The message said, "Still thinking about that laugh. You make stress worth it." My stomach dropped like it had been pushed down a corporate elevator shaft. I stared at that message for a full 30 seconds, hoping it would turn into something innocent like, "You left your USB in the printer." Spoiler, it didn't. When she came out of the bathroom, I played it cool. "Hey," I said, pretending to scroll through my phone. "Anthony texting this late, huh?" She froze for half a second, just enough for me to clock the guilt before the performance began. "Oh, it's work stuff. You wouldn't understand." That line hit different. You wouldn't understand. Translation: stay in your lane, champ. This is above your pay grade. Funny thing, though, I was the one paying the mortgage on the house she was getting dressed in for team dinners. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe they were just close coworkers. Maybe he was just friendly. Maybe I was an idiot. So I did what every self-respecting man in denial does. I ignored my instincts and opened a beer instead. But once you see a crack, you can't unsee it. The next day, she left for work smelling like a brand new woman. Not her usual light vanilla perfume. No, this one was expensive, bold, and screamed, "Someone's trying to impress a man who uses hair gel aggressively." When I asked if she was wearing something new, She smiled, that soft, patronizing smile that should come with a warning label. "It's just something I got from a client gift bag," she said. "Do you like it?" I didn't answer. I was too busy wondering which client handed out "Ode to Midlife Crisis" as a party favor. Then came the late-night calls. She'd sit in the living room, talking softly, laughing under her breath. Every time I walked in, she'd hang up. When I asked who it was, she'd say, "Work." At this point, work was basically her secret lover's code name. One night, I walked past her office and heard her whisper, "Stop, you'll get me in trouble." That's when my brain officially declared bankruptcy. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because if you confront too soon, they just call you paranoid. I decided to gather evidence. Not because I'm dramatic, but because I've watched enough true crime to know the first person to yell loses. The next week, Anthony started acting strange around me at the office. Yeah, the same office. Corporate America is the world's smallest town, and my wife's affair came with a front row seat. He started calling me champ, patting my shoulder like I was his intern. Once, he even said, "Jonah, you're one lucky guy. Mara's a catch." I smiled and replied, "Yeah, she's caught a lot lately." He laughed like it was a joke. I didn't. He had that confident swagger of a man who'd never been told no, the kind of guy who'd hit on a married woman and then justify it with a TED Talk about chemistry. One afternoon, I dropped by his office to drop off a report. The door was locked, which was weird because Anthony loved being accessible to compliments, to gossip, to women who didn't belong to him. I knocked, and after a few awkward seconds, he opened it halfway. His tie was loose, hair slightly messy. Behind him, on the couch, was Mara's purse. "Oh," he said, smiling like a man who just got caught cheating on Monopoly rules. "She just stopped by for a quick chat." A quick chat? Sure, because all quick chats involve a locked door and a couch that looks like it's been through emotional warfare. I handed him the report and left before I said something that would end with HR getting involved and me trending on LinkedIn for the wrong reasons. That night, Mara came home acting like she was auditioning for Best Wife in Denial. She made dinner, laughed at my jokes, even suggested we go out that weekend. It would have been sweet if it didn't feel like a cover-up. I went to kiss her, but her perfume hit me like a flashback. The same one from earlier. I asked, "You wear that perfume for work too?" She froze again, half a second, just like before. "It makes me feel confident," she said. I nodded. "Yeah, I bet it does." She didn't catch the sarcasm. She never did. By this point, my gut was practically holding a protest. Every instinct screamed that something was off. Still, I didn't have proof. And in marriage, proof is currency. Without it, you're just the jealous husband in a story she'll retell to her friends over wine. So I stayed calm. On the outside, at least. On the inside, my brain was an active crime scene. I started paying attention to details. The way she'd smile at her phone. The way she'd text and tilt the screen away. The way she suddenly had to travel for work every other week. She said it was for client meetings in Chicago. I checked her mileage app. It never logged the trips. Turns out, the only client she was visiting was about 20 minutes from our house, with a rooftop condo and a poor sense of boundaries. I confided in my buddy Lucas, the same tech genius with the moral flexibility of a raccoon. "You're getting played, bro," he said while shoveling chips into his mouth. "You want me to clone her phone?" I sighed. "That's illegal." He shrugged. "So is betrayal." The man had a point. I told him no at first. But later that night, when Mara's phone buzzed again at midnight and she smiled in her sleep, I reconsidered my stance on morality. By morning, I had Lucas on speed dial. Meanwhile, Anthony's behavior reached new levels of someone's about to get slapped. During a team lunch, he actually winked at Mara across the table. Not the friendly kind of wink. The kind that says, "We've broken several HR laws together." My fork stopped midair. The room felt heavy with unspoken gossip. I excused myself before I threw something that would get me arrested. As I walked past the restroom, I heard two coworkers whispering. "You think his wife and Anthony?" one said. The other replied, "Please, everyone knows." That was the punchline of my life. The only person who didn't know was the guy paying for her phone plan. That night, Mara came home late again, smelling like champagne and guilt. "Big client dinner," she said. "It went amazing." I looked at her heels, scuffed, not from walking, but from being tangled. I didn't ask. I just smiled, poured myself a drink, and said, "Glad you're winning, babe." She kissed my cheek. then went to shower. I sat on the couch, swirling the glass, watching the bubbles disappear. That's when it hit me. Love had turned into performance art. She was acting. I was pretending. And we both deserved Oscars for the way we faked normal. Over the next week, I started collecting small clues like a broke detective. Receipts from restaurants we never went to. Credit card charges labeled events. The scent of cologne that wasn't mine clinging to her clothes. I even found a strand of blonde hair on her blazer one morning. Anthony's assistance, maybe? Or maybe I was just going insane. Every lie she told came wrapped in sincerity. You're imagining things. You've been so distant lately. We need to communicate better. Oh, the irony. She was giving me marriage advice while probably booking hotel rooms under fake names. The breaking point came one Saturday. I woke up early and made breakfast, hoping to surprise her. Pancakes, bacon, coffee, the whole thing. But her phone buzzed again, face up on the counter, and there it was. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place. Where that perfume I like. I stared at that message until my vision blurred. I didn't even need to guess who it was from. Anthony Reeves, the man who probably practiced his smirk in the mirror every morning. I put the phone down carefully, like it was a grenade with feelings, and took a deep breath. When she walked into the kitchen, I smiled like everything was fine. Morning, I said. Breakfast's ready. She smiled back, unaware she was eating her last peaceful meal under my roof. As she bit into her pancakes, she asked, "What's in these?" I said, "Oh, just honesty and a hint of sarcasm." She laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. That was the day I stopped guessing and started planning. Love might make you blind, but betrayal gives you 20/20 vision. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I had everything. Proof, leverage, and maybe a little poetic justice. Because when people treat your life like a game, you don't flip the board. You learn the rules, and then you change them. By the time she left that night for her team event, I was already 2 steps ahead. Lucas was on standby, my suspicions were now data-driven, and my patience had expired. What Mara didn't know was that her phone, her secrets, and her perfume all had expiration dates, and I was about to collect the refund. They say the truth sets you free. What they don't mention is that first it punches you in the gut, steals your breath, and makes you question if you've been living in a sitcom written by your enemies. The morning I finally woke up didn't start with fireworks or confrontation. It started with the sound of laughter, the wrong kind. You know that soft, intimate laughter people save for moments when they think no one's listening? Yeah, that one. I'd left for work early that Friday, but fate, or maybe karma with a sense of humor, decided my 8 a.m. meeting got canceled. So I turned around, stopped by the house to grab my laptop charger, and walked straight into a live episode of So, My Wife's a Liar. The first thing I noticed when I opened the front door wasn't her. It was his watch, Anthony's obnoxious gold-plated watch, sitting on the kitchen counter like a shiny confession. It was the same watch he loved flashing in meetings, the one he claimed was a symbol of perseverance. Funny, I didn't realize perseverance came in 24-karat betrayal. I froze for a second. The house smelled like coffee and betrayal in equal parts. I heard them in the kitchen, laughing, whispering, low voices that had no business existing in my home. When I walked in, they both froze. Mara had her back turned, hair messy, wearing one of my shirts, which was poetic considering she'd clearly forgotten who it belonged to. Anthony was leaning against the counter like he owned it, holding a mug that said "World's Best Wife." I bought that mug for her anniversary gift. My eye twitched. "Morning," I said, calm as a monk who's done time. Mara's face drained of color. Then she smiled. Nervous, twitchy, the kind of smile you use when the fire alarm goes off in your brain, but you're pretending it's just a ringtone. "Jonah, you're home early," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "Meeting got canceled. Looks like I crashed another one instead." Anthony straightened up like he was preparing for a TED Talk on poor decision-making. "Jonah, I think there's been a misunderstanding." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, because the only misunderstanding I see here is you thinking my kitchen is a Marriott suite." His mouth opened, but no words came out. Just the sound of a man realizing his career, marriage, and hair gel budget were about to go up in flames. Mara tried to step closer, voice shaky but defiant. "I can explain," she said. That's always the opening line of a guilty person's monologue. I leaned back against the wall, crossed my arms, and said, "Go ahead. I'll even make popcorn." She didn't explain, of course. She just stood there, looking at me like I was the problem for catching her in the act. Anthony grabbed his jacket, mumbling something about leaving, and brushed past me. I caught the faint whiff of his cologne. Expensive, overconfident, nauseating. He didn't meet my eyes. Smart move. If he had, I might have rearranged his dental alignment. The door slammed, leaving behind silence thick enough to choke on. Mara finally turned to me, tears welling up but not falling. She always had this gift for emotional theater, knew how to look broken without feeling a thing. "Jonah," she whispered, "please don't look at me like that." I laughed. "Like what?" "Like I'm finally seeing you for who you are." She tried to talk, but I wasn't in the mood for dialogue. I walked past her, grabbed the mug he'd used, and dropped it into the trash can with a satisfying clink. "You know," I said, "for someone who loves rules, you sure don't respect boundaries." She said it was a mistake, that it just happened, that she didn't mean to hurt me. Classic lines, straight from the betrayer's handbook. I wanted to yell, to throw something, to demand every answer. But I didn't. I just stood there, too calm for comfort. I think it scared her more than anger would have. That night, I didn't yell or slam doors. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan like it might spell out why everything I'd built suddenly collapsed. Every spin of the blades felt like a rewind of the last 9 years. Every laugh, every date, every whispered promise, all of it suddenly hollow. Around 3 a.m., something inside me snapped, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, surgical one. It was like the sound of a switch being flipped. The old Jonah, the forgiving, accommodating, "let's talk about this" Jonah, died somewhere between the second and third spin of that ceiling fan. What replaced him was calm, strategic, and terrifyingly focused. By morning, I wasn't mourning anymore. I was calculating. Because when someone turns your life into a joke, you've got two options: cry or deliver the punchline yourself. I chose the latter. I started my day like nothing happened. Made coffee, shaved, even hummed a little. Mara came downstairs looking wrecked, makeup smeared, eyes puffy, wearing guilt like cheap perfume. "You didn't come to bed," she said softly. "Didn't feel like sleeping next to a stranger," I replied. She winced. "Jonah, please, I didn't mean for this to happen." I sipped my coffee. "Yeah, affairs tend to happen the same way people trip and fall into luxury vacations with their boss." She followed me around the kitchen, talking about how she loves me, and it didn't mean anything. That part made me laugh so hard I nearly choked on my toast. Didn't mean anything? You risked your marriage, your job, and your dignity for a man who wears gold watches indoors. That's not meaningless. That's stupid with confidence. She cried harder, and I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered the text messages, the perfume, the laughter. Compassion exited the building. She begged me not to do anything rash, which was hilarious because I'd never been calmer in my life. I told her I needed time to think, and she believed me because people like Mara always mistake silence for surrender. But my silence wasn't peace, it was planning. The rest of the day, I went about my routine like a ghost. I went to work, smiled at coworkers, pretended everything was fine. Inside, I was building a strategy. I wasn't going to let rage make me sloppy. No, I was going to let logic make me lethal. That evening, I met up with Lucas at our favorite dive bar, the Rusty Tap, the kind of place that smelled like regret and fried wings. He took one look at me and said, "You've got that someone's about to regret messing with me look." I told him what happened. He didn't react with pity. He just nodded and said, "So, how bad do you want payback?" I smiled. "Let's just say I'm past the forgiveness stage." He grinned. "Good. I've been waiting years to use my skills for evil." That's when Operation Truth Bomb was born. Over the next few days, I pretended to play the heartbroken husband while quietly setting the stage. I started going through her old messages, cloud backups, work calendar. I found patterns. Hotel bookings labeled as team building retreats. Expense reimbursements for client dinners that somehow took place on weekends. I wasn't even mad anymore. I was impressed by the level of effort it took to lie this well. I confronted her once more, just to test her consistency. "You ever been to the Willow Hotel?" I asked casually. Her fork froze midair. Maybe for a meeting," she said. "Yeah," I nodded. "Must have been one hell of a meeting. Your name's on 5 separate room receipts." The look on her face was pure panic, and for a second, I felt satisfaction. Not revenge yet, just a preview. She tried to flip it on me, accusing me of spying, not trusting her, and my personal favorite, making her feel unsafe. The mental gymnastics were Olympic level. I told her she'd earned her gold medal in gaslighting. She ran upstairs crying, slamming the door. I stayed downstairs, calm, collected, and pouring myself another drink. Every sip tasted like resolve. That night, I slept on the couch, phone in hand, planning my next move. I wasn't leaving the house, not yet. I wanted her comfortable, unsuspecting, thinking she still had control. People reveal more when they think they've already won. By Sunday, she was back to her routine, texting, dressing up, working late. I kissed her on the cheek before she left and said, "Don't work too hard." She smiled, clueless, and drove away in the car I paid for, heading straight toward her downfall. After she left, I called Lucas. "It's time," I said. He didn't even ask what I meant. "You want the cameras or the phone clone first?" he asked. "Both," I said, and I want it done right. Because if I was going to expose them, I wasn't going to do it with petty rumors. I was going to do it with receipts so clean the FBI would slow clap. As I sat in that quiet house, surrounded by the ghosts of a marriage I no longer recognized, something surprising happened. I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. The kind of awake that makes you notice details you used to overlook. The chipped corner on the counter she swore she'd fix. The framed photo from our honeymoon, where she smiled at the camera, but her eyes were already somewhere else. The faint smell of Anthony's cologne lingering like a bad memory. For the first time, I saw everything clearly. Love hadn't blinded me. It had tranquilized me. And I was finally sober. By the time she got home that night, I was ready. I smiled, asked about her day, played the part of the clueless husband. She talked about networking opportunities and big projects coming up. I nodded, poured her a glass of wine, and said, "You deserve it." She smiled, probably thinking she'd won me over again. But what she didn't know was that she was drinking to her own finale. That was the night I stopped being her husband and started being her reckoning. I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient. And patience, when fueled by betrayal, is the most dangerous weapon on earth. You ever realize how betrayal turns you into a tech genius overnight? Because before all this, I couldn't even sync my phone with Bluetooth without threatening to throw it into traffic. But when your wife's sleeping with her boss, suddenly you're hacking into cloud backups like you've got a degree from the CIA's YouTube division. That's how my transformation began, from heartbroken husband to undercover IT operative. The mission? Exposed two idiots with power issues. The codename? Operation Karma, in HD. Step 1 was simple, surveillance. Lucas, my partner in crime, or, as he calls himself, a freelance justice technician, showed up that Sunday morning with a duffel bag full of gadgets that probably violated 6 privacy laws. "This," he said, holding up a pen with a lens, "is 1080p with sound. It'll catch everything." He also brought a tiny motion sensor, a few hidden cameras disguised as air fresheners, and a phone cloning device that looked like something Tony Stark might have built on his lunch break. "We're not just catching her," he said. "We're catching her professionally." I stared at the pile like a man about to commit emotional espionage. "You sure this is legal?" I asked. Lucas grinned. "Legal? No. Satisfying. Absolutely." That was good enough for me. We installed the first camera in the living room, angled perfectly at the couch, the same one she used for her conference calls. The second one went in the kitchen, because apparently infidelity likes to marinate next to the coffee maker. The third was subtle, a tiny button camera near the bookshelf in her office. I figured if she wanted to keep secrets, I'd keep receipts. Then came her phone. Lucas cloned it in minutes, syncing every message, call, and note straight to a hidden app on mine. The moment it buzzed with a new notification, my stomach buzzed with caffeine and dread. The first few messages were boring, work chatter, calendar invites, a grocery list. Then came the good stuff. "You looked stunning today. I can't stop thinking about last night. Same place next week?" And just like that, I became a witness to my own humiliation in real time. Funny thing about reading texts like that, you'd think it would destroy you. And yeah, it hurt, but mostly it made me numb. It's hard to feel pain when you're too busy planning payback. I screenshotted everything. Dates, times, messages. I even started categorizing them like I was building a betrayal database. January 12th, hotel meetup. January 26th, lunch, meeting. By the end of the week, I had a digital scrapbook of infidelity that could make a divorce lawyer cry tears of joy. But evidence wasn't enough. I wanted context. I wanted to see the looks on their faces when they thought no one was watching. The cameras helped with that. Every night after she went to bed, I'd review the footage on my laptop like some deranged security guard in a romantic horror film. Sometimes, I'd see her on the couch, laughing on FaceTime, whispering things that made my blood boil. Once, I saw Anthony's car pull into the driveway. They didn't even make it to the couch that time. I had to pause the video and walk outside before I broke something valuable, like his face. But you know what stopped me? The realization that revenge isn't about rage, it's about rhythm. If you rush it, you ruin it. I needed more than a scandal. I needed a finale. Something public, poetic, and impossible to forget. And for that, I needed information bigger than infidelity. So I called in Lucas again. "You're a tech guy," I said. "How hard would it be to, say, mirror Anthony's company's server?" He raised an eyebrow. "You trying to get fired or knighted?" "Maybe both," I said. He grinned. "You're lucky I love chaos." Within days, Lucas had mirrored Anthony's digital kingdom. Emails, transactions, private folders, everything. The man was dirtier than a politician's tax file. Offshore accounts, unreported bonuses, bribes disguised as consulting fees. He was using company funds for personal travel, including the business trips with my wife. Each document felt like a new level in the video game of justice. "Dude," Lucas said, scrolling through an encrypted folder. "This guy's practically writing his own indictment." "Good," I said. "Let's make it a bestseller." For weeks, I played it cool, smiled in meetings, sent Mara good morning texts, kissed her on the forehead before she left for work. All the while, I was archiving her downfall. Every time she looked at me with that fake innocence, I had to fight the urge to laugh. She thought she was manipulating me. She didn't realize she was auditioning for the lead role in her own public meltdown. Then one evening, while reviewing new footage, I caught something unexpected. Not Anthony this time, but Mara alone, sitting on the couch, staring at her phone, crying. For a split second, it threw me off. I'd gotten so used to seeing her as the villain that I forgot she was human. She muttered to herself, "What have I done?" Part of me wanted to believe she felt guilty. The other part knew guilt wasn't the same as regret. It was just fear of getting caught. And trust me, getting caught was coming. The next day, I decided to test her loyalty, or what was left of it. Over breakfast, I said casually, "I might get transferred out of state for work." She blinked, trying to hide relief. "Oh, really?" she said, tone way too bright for someone hearing their husband might leave. "Yeah," I replied. "Maybe New York. Maybe Chicago. Depends on what opens up." She smiled, actually smiled, and said, "That could be good for you." That was it. No hesitation. No, "I'll miss you." No, "What about us?" Just an invisible shove toward the door. That's when I knew she was done pretending. That night, I texted Lucas, "We're moving to Phase 3. Phase 3 was what I called the insurance plan. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about protection. I started meeting with a divorce attorney, a calm, sharp woman named Sharon Wells who handled high-profile breakups with surgical precision. When I showed her the evidence, she looked at me like she'd just seen a Picasso painting of destruction. "Jonah," she said, flipping through screenshots, "this isn't a case. It's an exhibit." She explained how we'd freeze assets, file quietly, and let the storm hit them before they even knew the forecast. "By the time they realize what's happening," she said, "you'll already be in the clear." I liked her immediately. Meanwhile, at home, Mara was still performing her version of domestic bliss. Cooking dinners, asking about my day, even suggesting a weekend getaway. I smiled and nodded, all while knowing I'd soon be the one taking a trip away from her entire illusion. I even started journaling, which sounds lame until you realize writing "Don't punch Anthony in the throat 10 times a day" is cheaper than therapy. Then came the corporate party invitation. Annual celebration, it said, in gold cursive font. Anthony's company was throwing a rooftop event for employees and their families. Translation, an ego parade with free drinks. Mara couldn't stop gushing about it. "It's a huge deal," she said. "Anthony wants everyone there." I almost laughed out loud. Of course he did. What better place for a man who loves the spotlight to light himself on fire? That's when I knew the party would be the stage for my finale. I spent the next few days tightening every screw in my plan. Lucas helped me set up encrypted backups of all files, emails, transactions, videos, everything. I gave copies to Sharon, another to a private cloud, and one on a sleek black folder I'd carry to the event itself. My props were ready. My performance rehearsed. The only thing left was the timing. Because if I'd learned anything from this mess, it's that revenge, like comedy, is all about timing. A day before the party, Mara came home early, humming to herself, twirling her hair like life was perfect. She hugged me from behind and said, "You've been quiet lately." I smiled, finishing my coffee. "Just tired," I said. "Long week." She kissed my cheek, oblivious to the fact that she was hugging her biggest mistake. She went upstairs, phone buzzing with another text from AR. I didn't even need to look. I knew what it said. Something charming, something gross, something that would age terribly once it hit the projector screen. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of anger, but because I was finally free of it. I realized I wasn't just taking revenge. I was reclaiming control. For months, I'd been living like a ghost, waiting, watching, surviving. But now I was writing the ending. And for once, it was mine. I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and whispered, "Tomorrow, the show begins." In that moment, I almost felt bad for them. Almost. Because they had no idea what was coming. They thought they'd gotten away with it, that they'd fooled the world. But tomorrow night, under those fancy rooftop lights, they'd learn a valuable lesson about underestimating quiet men. And if Karma had a sense of humor, which I'm pretty sure she does, she'd be sitting front row, sipping wine, and clapping. If irony had a favorite playground, it would have been that rooftop. Nothing screams corporate loyalty like expensive champagne, fake laughter, and a skyline pretending to care about your life choices. The event was hosted by none other than Anthony Reeves, the man, the myth, the midlife crisis in designer shoes. He'd rented out the top floor of the Bluestone Hotel, complete with a live jazz band, overpriced catering, and waiters who looked like they regretted every career decision that led them there. It was supposed to be the company's annual celebration. To me, it was opening night for my favorite performance, Poetic Justice. Encrypted files uploaded, emails sent on delay, and a projector cue ready for my big moment. The rooftop was wired for disaster, and I had front row seats. The party started like all these pretentious soirees do, with bad speeches and people pretending to enjoy the CEO's jokes. The company's board members stood in a row, smiling like mannequins, while Anthony strutted across the stage like a motivational speaker on caffeine. "Tonight," he declared, "we celebrate loyalty, hard work, and integrity." The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. I took a slow sip of my drink, trying not to choke on the hypocrisy. Beside me, Mara clapped, her perfect nails glinting under the lights, probably unaware that this was her last public applause. Anthony's speech was a masterpiece of nonsense. He thanked his incredible team, bragged about breaking records, and sprinkled in buzzwords like synergy and vision. I half expected him to pull out a PowerPoint labeled "How to Betray Everyone" and still get a bonus. The crowd loved it, though. People will cheer for anything if there's free alcohol involved. Then, halfway through, he dropped the line that turned the party into history. "Before we wrap up," he said, smiling directly at me, "I want to make a special announcement. Tomorrow, one of our most dedicated employees will be joining me on a private vacation, an all-expenses paid reward for excellence." The crowd oohed like they were watching reality TV. He looked at Mara and extended a hand. "If she agrees, of course." That smug grin on his face could have powered the whole building. Mara hesitated just long enough to look guilty, then flipped her hair and said, "I agree." The crowd laughed, some out of awkwardness, others because they didn't know what else to do. And me? I didn't laugh. I just stood up slowly, straightened my jacket, and said, "Well, that's one way to announce a scandal." Every eye in the room turned to me. Mara froze, Anthony blinked, and the band stopped mid-note. The silence was delicious. I walked out without another word, leaving behind whispers that grew like wildfire. Was that his wife? Did he just— Oh my God! The city lights glared down as I crossed the rooftop's edge toward the stairwell, pretending to need air. Truth was, I was letting suspense marinate. The best reveals need silence before the storm. 5 minutes later, I came back, with my black folder tucked under my arm. The same folder that held Anthony's financial skeletons, love notes, and crimes wrapped in legalese. When I re-entered, the crowd was buzzing. Anthony tried to laugh it off, raising his glass like a man who thought confidence could erase evidence. "Folks, let's not make drama where there isn't any. It's just a joke," he said. "We're all family here." "Then you won't mind opening this in front of your family," I said, placing the folder on the table in front of him. The room fell quiet again. He stared at it, confused, and I gestured politely. "Go ahead, boss. You like making announcements, right? Here's one you missed." He opened it. The moment his eyes hit the documents, I saw it, the flicker of panic. His smirk collapsed. His fingers trembled slightly as he flipped through page after page of bank statements, falsified invoices, and wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. A couple of board members leaned forward to read. One of them muttered, "Is this real?" "Oh, it's real," I said. "And just in case anyone doubts it, those same files have been sent to the board and federal investigators. I thought I'd help speed up tomorrow's headlines." Anthony looked up, pale as printer paper. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, voice cracking. "Oh, I do," I replied. "You made this personal. I'm just making it public." The crowd began murmuring again. Phones came out. Cameras clicked. Mara stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Jonah, what is this?" "Your career in flames," I said. "Buckle up." She turned toward Anthony, whispering, "Tell me this isn't true." He didn't answer. She looked back at me, realizing for the first time that maybe she wasn't the smartest person in the room. Someone from the board grabbed Anthony's arm, whispering furiously. Another one started dialing on his phone. The band tried to restart the music, probably hoping sound could drown chaos. It couldn't. Anthony stammered, "You have no proof of personal misconduct." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you mean this?" I motioned to the projector, which flickered to life behind him. The crowd turned as the company's highlight reel cut out, and a very different kind of highlight began playing. There they were, Anthony and Mara, caught in crisp HD glory. Hotel rooms, dinner dates, the office couch that HR will never be able to disinfect enough. The footage rolled with timestamp overlays, matching perfectly with company expense reports. The audience gasped in unison like a choir of disbelief. Someone dropped a glass. Someone else whispered, "Holy sh**T." Anthony lunged toward the projector, shouting, "Turn it off." But Lucas had locked the feed remotely. The video kept looping while half the crowd recorded it with their phones. You can't stop viral content, not when it's earned. Mara screamed at me, mascara streaking, "Why would you do this to us?" I laughed. "Us? Sweetheart, there's no us in betrayal." She started to cry, muttering about love and mistakes, but no one was listening. They were too busy watching the emperor lose his clothes, figuratively and literally. Anthony's PR manager fainted. His assistant ran to call security. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, calm as a saint in a scandal. When Anthony finally reached the power cord and yanked it out, it was already too late. The damage was global. I'd sent the same footage to the company's official social media account 15 minutes earlier on a scheduled post. By now, the internet had receipts. Security showed up, but they didn't know who to escort out. Anthony for fraud, Mara for humiliation, or me for grand entertainment. The board president stepped forward, shaking his head. "Anthony," he said, "we'll be in touch. Don't leave town." Translation, "Your career's over, and we'll take it from here." Anthony glared at me, jaw tight, but all that arrogance had melted. "You think you've won?" he hissed. I smiled. "Oh, I don't think I know." Then I turned to the crowd. "You wanted a show about loyalty? Well, you just got the finale." I started to walk out again, ignoring Mara's sobs and the whispers following behind. The elevator ride down felt like an exorcism. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of her, kneeling on the floor in her red dress, surrounded by people filming, her life collapsing in real time. For a split second, I almost felt pity. But pity's a luxury for the innocent, and she'd spent hers on hotel reservations. When I reached the lobby, Lucas was waiting outside, leaning against his car with a grin. "So," he said, "how'd the circus go?" I handed him the now empty folder. "Standing ovation," I said. He laughed. "Man, you are terrifyingly calm." "That's the secret," I replied. "They never see calm coming." We drove off, the city lights fading behind us, and I finally exhaled for the first time in months. The music from the rooftop still echoed faintly through the air, jazz mixed with chaos. As we hit the highway, Lucas looked at me and said, "You realize you just made enemies with people who own private jets, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, but they don't own the truth." "I do." We laughed, the kind of laugh that comes after victory and exhaustion shake hands. By the time I got home, I wasn't angry anymore. Just empty, clean, done. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. I poured a drink, toasted the silence, and whispered, "To endings." Because that night wasn't just about revenge. It was about balance. And for the first time in a long time, everything felt balanced. You know that calm moment right before a storm, when the air feels too still, and even nature pauses like it's holding its breath? That was the rooftop right after I walked back in with the black folder. The jazz band had stopped pretending to care, the waiters froze mid-pour, and the crowd, hundreds of expensively dressed hypocrites, watched like I'd brought a live grenade to a baby shower. In a way, I had. That folder wasn't just paper. It was the collected karma of two people who'd spent months rehearsing deceit like a Broadway number. And tonight, I was the director calling for their final bow. I could feel their eyes. Mara's confused, Anthony's wary, everyone else's hungry for drama, because nothing spices up a corporate event like a potential scandal. I placed the folder on the nearest table, right in front of Anthony. The sound it made was soft but final, like a gavel hitting judgment. "Mind opening that, boss?" I said with the politest smile I could muster. I called him boss not because he was mine, God no, but because the sarcasm hit better when the title stung. Anthony hesitated, his smile twitching the way liars' smiles do when they realize the punchline might be about them. He reached out, fingers trembling slightly, and flipped the folder open. His face drained faster than champagne at a free bar. Inside were copies of his offshore transfers, shell company filings, kickbacks, and expense reports labeled consulting retreats that were really hotel receipts with timestamps matching Mara's business trips. My favorite page, though? The wire to a Cayman account under the alias Reeves Consulting Limited, which would have been clever if he hadn't signed it himself. I'd included sticky notes with sarcastic labels too, because if I was going to ruin a man, I was at least going to do it with personality. One note said, "Nice try, Bond." Another, "Tax season's gonna hit different." The crowd's confusion turned into a collective murmur. People craned their necks, whispering like churchgoers discovering their pastor had a Tinder profile. One of the board members, a man named Harold with a face permanently stuck in judgment mode, leaned in and said, "Anthony, what is this?" Anthony tried to speak, but all that came out was, "This is fake. This is all fake." "Sure," I said, sipping my drink, "and I'm the Pope. You want to check the emails tied to those transactions? Or should I just let the board finish reading?" Mara, bless her delusional heart, reached for the folder like she could snatch the truth away. "Jonah, what is this?" she asked, eyes wide, mascara trembling on the brink of collapse. "Your career in flames," I said casually. "Buckle up." That line had been sitting in my head for days, waiting for its big debut. It landed perfectly. Half the room gasped. The other half pretended not to smirk. Even Lucas, who was somewhere in the crowd disguised as event tech support, probably gave me a mental high five. Anthony looked like a man watching his house burn while holding the matches. He tried to laugh it off. "Ladies and gentlemen, my ex-employee here has a very vivid imagination. None of this means anything." "Oh, it means something," I said. "It means you've been stealing from your own company while also sleeping with my wife. Though frankly, the embezzlement part offends me more. At least with Mara, I knew she had bad taste." The room collectively inhaled. Someone in the back muttered, "Oh damn." It echoed perfectly. Anthony's mask cracked. "You don't know what you're talking about," he hissed. "I know everything," I said, leaning forward. "Emails, transfers, texts, photos. You name it. You've been sloppy, Anthony. And arrogance? That's a hell of a paper trail." I nodded at the folder. "That's just the appetizer. The main course was sent to your board of directors and the federal investigators about an hour ago. By the time dessert is served, they'll have questions about your loyalty bonuses." Mara turned to him, panic rising like bad perfume. "Anthony, tell me this isn't true." He didn't. He couldn't. His silence said more than any denial could. She looked back at me, tears spilling now, voice breaking. "Jonah, Please, why are you doing this? Why? I said, laughing quietly. Because when you spend months making a joke out of my life, it's only fair I deliver the punchline. Security had started edging closer, not sure who to escort out. That's the problem with moral chaos. It confuses authority. Anthony barked, "Get him out of here." But Harold, the board member, raised a hand. "Not so fast, Reeves. We need to verify some things first." Translation: they smelled blood in the water and wanted to make sure it wasn't theirs. The crowd's curiosity mutated into fascination. Phones came out, because of course they did. This was America. If drama doesn't end up online, did it even happen? Someone whispered, "Is this a prank?" Another said, "No way. This is real." I could feel the attention shift from gossip to awe, and that's when I realized something. For months, Anthony had been the man everyone envied. Rich, powerful, adored. But now, standing there pale and sweating under the lights, he was just another cautionary tale in an expensive suit. He tried one last Hail Mary. "You're finished, Reed. You've just committed defamation, blackmail, whatever this is, it's illegal." "You're right," I said. "So is wire fraud, sexual harassment, and tax evasion, but I'm not the one doing those. Don't worry, though. You'll get plenty of time to discuss legality with your lawyer." A few people actually laughed at that, trying to hide it behind their glasses. The board members exchanged looks, murmured something, and 3 of them walked off with their phones out, likely making those emergency calls that end with asset freezes and press releases. Anthony's voice cracked again. "You can't destroy me." "Buddy," I said, smiling, "you did that yourself. I just brought popcorn." Mara reached for me again, her voice desperate now. "Jonah, please, we can fix this. Just tell me what you want." "Peace," I said. "And you can't give that." She sobbed harder, her makeup streaking into war paint. Someone handed her a napkin. I almost thanked them. It added theatrical flair. Anthony tried to recover, straightening his jacket like the fabric could restore dignity. "Let's all calm down," he said, forcing a laugh. "This is clearly the act of a bitter man trying to ruin my reputation." I nodded. "You're right about one thing. I am bitter. But your reputation? You did that part solo. I just provided the lighting." Then I gestured to the folder again. "Keep it. Souvenir. You'll need it when the auditors come knocking." By then, the rooftop had split into factions. One side wanted to flee before the metaphorical explosion. The other stayed, glued to their spot like they were watching a live Netflix original. And in the middle, Anthony and Mara stood like 2 broken pillars of ego, trying to hold up a crumbling empire. I turned to leave, but before I did, I leaned toward Anthony and said quietly, "You know what's funny? You spent your life climbing ladders. Tonight, you tripped over your own rung." As I walked toward the exit, I heard the sound of chaos blooming behind me. Board members shouting, security radioing, guests whispering, Mara crying. It was symphonic. Lucas caught up with me near the elevator, camera bag slung over his shoulder. "That was intense," he said, grinning. "I give your performance a solid 10. "Thanks," I said. "Think it'll go viral?" "Already trending," he replied, showing me his phone. A video titled CEO's Rooftop Meltdown had thousands of views in under 5 minutes. Guess your 15 minutes of fame are about to hit him first. I chuckled as the elevator doors closed. Good. Maybe he can finally use that charisma to apologize to his shareholders. Downstairs, the hotel lobby buzzed with the confused chatter of guests who'd heard the noise but didn't know the story. I walked past them, calm, composed, folder-free. Outside, the night air hit me like oxygen after years underwater. Lucas exhaled beside me. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "Better than I've been in months." "You think they'll come after you?" "Maybe," I said. "But that's the thing about truth. It doesn't scare easy." We got into his car, the city lights bouncing off the windshield like confetti. As we drove away, I looked at the skyline, the same one Anthony used to brag about owning pieces of through his developments. Now it looked like it was watching him burn. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just closure. The kind that doesn't scream, doesn't gloat, it just exhales. When I got home, the house felt different. Lighter, like the walls had been holding their breath too. I poured a drink, turned on some old blues, and sank into the couch. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts from coworkers, journalists, even my boss. Most said variations of "holy crap, is it true?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen until it dimmed and said quietly, "Yeah, it's true." A few hours later, an email notification popped up from an unknown sender. The subject line, "You win." I opened it. It was Anthony. The message was short, "Enjoy your moment. It won't last." I laughed. "Buddy," I said to the screen, "I don't need it to last. I just need you to remember it." I turned off my phone, finished my drink, and leaned back. The folder of doom had done its job. And the best part? I didn't have to lift another finger. The rest would unravel on its own. Because truth, once released, doesn't need maintenance. It just does what it does, destroys everything fake it touches. That night, I finally slept. Not because the pain was gone, but because the noise was. And silence, after betrayal, is the sweetest sound in the world. If there's one thing I've learned about truth, it's that it never knocks politely. It kicks the damn door in, uninvited, wearing muddy boots, and makes itself comfortable in front of everyone who thought they were safe. That's exactly what happened that night when the projector, the innocent, company-issued projector meant for stock updates and PowerPoint slides about team growth, decided to expose two people's extracurricular activities to an audience of roughly 200 employees, partners, and social climbers. You could have heard a mouse faint. Now, you might think I planned every pixel of that chaos, and you'd be right. Lucas and I had spent 2 nights straight making sure the files were lined up, the timing perfect, and the projector synced to autoplay. All I had to do was wait for Anthony to open his big mouth about loyalty. He loved that word, mostly because he didn't understand it. And when he gave that smug grin and said, "Let's raise a glass to loyalty," I swear even God leaned over a cloud somewhere and said, "All right, Jonah, your move." I didn't move at first. I just stood there, swirling my drink, letting him soak in his own confidence for another second. Because confidence before collapse? That's art. Then I walked to the back, gave Lucas a subtle nod, and the projector flickered. It was supposed to show quarterly highlights, revenue charts, smiling employees, all that jazz. Instead, it froze, glitched once, then switched to a video file labeled highlights and for final.mp4. I'll never forget the sound that followed. It was this collective gasp, a single, long inhale that sucked the life out of the room. On screen, there they were, Anthony and Mara, tangled up in hotel beds, kissing in conference rooms, whispering things that should have stayed between lies. The timestamps glowed in the corner like digital receipts of shame. Every clip was short, brutal, and undeniable. It was the kind of video that didn't need narration. Just let the evidence speak while you sip your drink and wait for the world to implode. Anthony's face went from tan to ghostly white faster than I've ever seen a human change color. "Turn it off," he barked, lunging toward the laptop. But Lucas had already locked it remotely. The system was password protected under one phrase: "Checkmate, buddy." He yanked cables, cursed, even shouted for security, but by then, half the guests already had their phones out. You can't stop viral content. It spreads faster than guilt. Within 30 seconds, people were whispering, recording, live tweeting. I overheard one intern whisper, "Oh my God, this is better than Netflix." Mara froze. Her hand went to her mouth, eyes wide, like she'd just woken up from a dream only to realize it was actually her life falling apart. "Jonah," she gasped, turning toward me. "Why would you do this to us?" I laughed, a quiet, humorless laugh that still managed to echo through the silence. "Us? Sweetheart, there's no us in betrayal." That shut her up faster than the video ever could. Anthony tried again to pull the plug, but it was too late. I'd set it on a loop, 3 minutes of karma on repeat. The second time the footage rolled, people started reacting out loud. Gasps turned to whispers, whispers turned to muffled laughter, and soon enough, even the band in the corner decided to pack up quietly. One of the HR heads nearly fainted. The board members, oh, they looked like they'd just found out their company mascot was running an underground fight club. I leaned against a table, sipping my drink like a man watching fireworks he built himself. I didn't even need to speak anymore. The video was saying everything for me. Anthony spun toward me, pointing, rage bubbling beneath his humiliation. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You're finished, Jonah." "Finished," I said, raising an eyebrow. "Buddy, I just started the sequel to your downfall." Security arrived, 2 bulky guys in suits who clearly had no idea which rich person they were supposed to protect. Sir, one of them said to me, we're going to have to ask you to leave. Before I could answer, Harold, the board's oldest and crankiest member, stepped forward. No, he said, voice sharp. Let him stay? Mr. Reeves, however, should explain why company resources are funding his personal escapades. Boom. Just like that. The tables turned so fast you could smell the smoke. Anthony stuttered. This is all fabricated. Some kind of deep fake. Classic excuse. Too bad I'd watermarked every clip with his voice and company timestamps. You sure? I asked, grinning. Because your watch says otherwise. Literally. The camera had caught his infamous gold watch flashing in nearly every frame. The same watch that was currently on his wrist. The crowd turned toward him, eyes like daggers. He tried to cover it, but that just made it worse. It's not what it looks like, he shouted. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, I said. The whispers spread like wildfire. People recording. People texting their friends. You could practically hear the collective ping of scandal notifications lighting up across the city. Mara started crying. Loud, messy, the kind of sobbing that makes strangers uncomfortable. I used to hate seeing her cry. This time, I just felt tired. She reached for me, voice cracking. Please, Jonah, can we talk? I stepped back. We talked for 9 years. You just never listened. Anthony, cornered and furious, turned to her. You told me this was handled, he hissed. Handled? I laughed. Oh, buddy, she handled plenty, just not this. Someone in the crowd actually snorted. The tension broke for a second as awkward laughter bubbled up, and Anthony looked around, realizing the empire he'd built on charisma had turned into quicksand. Security, get these cameras off, he shouted, but even the guards were recording discreetly now. That's corporate America for you. No loyalty, just content opportunities. Meanwhile, the board members had started leaving in small clusters, each looking at their phones like stock prices were dropping. Spoiler, they were. Anthony's name was trending online within minutes. #RooftopReeves. I didn't plan the hashtag, but man, it was poetic. As he continued to panic, I decided to lean into the absurdity of it all. I poured myself another glass of champagne, raised it slightly, and said, Ladies and gentlemen, a toast to transparency. Half the room laughed. The other half filmed it. Mara covered her face, whispering, Stop this, please. I looked at her and said, You should have stopped this months ago. Anthony lunged toward me then, hand raised, eyes wild. Security finally found their purpose and held him back. You destroyed everything, he screamed. You did that all by yourself, I said calmly. I just pressed play. He cursed, shouted something about lawyers, but it didn't matter. The damage was irreversible. Once something's on the internet, it's immortal. I turned to leave. The rooftop lights shimmered behind me like they were clapping. As I passed Mara, she grabbed my arm, sobbing. Jonah, please. I love you. I stopped, looked at her tear-streaked face, and said softly, You love yourself. I just stopped being your audience. Then I walked away, leaving her crying and Anthony screaming as the crowd documented every humiliating second. The elevator ride down felt eternal, but in a good way. When the doors closed, I finally let out the laugh I'd been holding in. Not a manic one, but a real, honest laugh. The kind that comes from deep relief and a touch of disbelief that you actually pulled it off. Lucas texted as soon as I reached the lobby. Video files everywhere. Arson meltdown. FBI probably calling by breakfast. I replied, Perfect. Leave the projector plugged in. By the time I got outside, the city had already moved on. Taxis honked. People laughed. And the night carried on as if the biggest corporate implosion of the decade hadn't just unfolded 30 floors above. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the air, crisp and clean in a way betrayal never is. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. Done being the nice guy. Done being the forgiving husband. Done pretending to be fine while my world burned quietly. I'd set the fire myself now, and it felt righteous. When I got home, the silence was loud. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but earned. I poured myself a drink, turned on the TV, and every news channel was already playing clips from the rooftop. The ticker read, Corporate Scandal Rocks Brookstone Dynamics. Below it, CEO Reeves under investigation. I watched as talking heads speculated, reporters gasped, and analysts broke down stock losses like they were narrating a slow-motion car crash. It was beautiful. Then my phone buzzed. Texts. voicemails, calls. Friends, coworkers, even people I barely knew suddenly wanted to talk. Bro, you legend. Is it true you leaked the video? You're trending. I ignored them all. I wasn't interested in fame. Just peace. And maybe the sweet sound of Anthony's career imploding in surround sound. At midnight, a single text came through from Mara. Please, can we talk tomorrow? I need you. I stared at it for a long time, then typed back. You needed me before. Now you just need damage control. Then I blocked her number. I sat there, drink in hand, watching the headlines flash, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, clarity. Justice doesn't always come with sirens or courtrooms. Sometimes it comes with a projector, a file labeled final, and a quiet man who decided to stop being the victim. As I finished my drink, I couldn't help but grin. The screen of sins had done its job, broadcasting karma in 1080p. Anthony would wake up tomorrow unemployed, indicted, and famous for all the wrong reasons. Mara would wake up alone, exposed, and finally realizing what it feels like to be on the receiving end of betrayal. Me? I'd wake up free. You know that weird calm after an explosion, when everything's still smoking, and you can't tell if the silence means it's over or something worse is about to start. That was my Monday morning. Except the explosion was Anthony Reeves' entire career, and the smoke was the public humiliation wafting through every news outlet in the city. If you typed his name into Google, the first suggestion was Anthony Reeves scandal. The second? Anthony Reeves pants. Apparently, someone had slowed down a frame from the video. Internet immortality, ladies and gentlemen. By 7 a.m., the world had moved faster than I ever could have planned. Brookstone Dynamics stock had plummeted. The board released a statement that sounded like it was written while someone was hyperventilating. Effective immediately, Anthony Reeves has been suspended pending an internal investigation. Translation: we threw him under the bus, but the wheels haven't even cooled yet. Employees were leaking internal emails. Reporters camped outside the office building like it was the Oscars for corporate downfall. And me? I was making pancakes. Because nothing pairs better with poetic justice than maple syrup. My phone was blowing up, calls, texts, notifications. People who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly wanted to check in. My boss, Linda, left me a voicemail that started with, Jonah, I don't know whether to fire you or promote you, and ended with, call me when the media dies down. Lucas texted, he's trending #1 worldwide. FBI froze his accounts. You're a god. I replied, nah, just a guy with good timing. He sent back a gif of fireworks and the words, mission accomplished. He wasn't wrong. By mid-morning, every major outlet had picked up the story. One anchor said, in a shocking turn of events, corporate executive Anthony Reeves faces charges of fraud, embezzlement, and workplace misconduct. Shocking turn of events? Please. The only thing shocking was that it took this long for karma to clock in. They even played a short clip from the rooftop, carefully edited for broadcast, of course. Just enough for viewers to see the panic in his eyes before they cut to stock footage of skyscrapers and handshakes. And then there was Mara. Oh, Mara. Around noon, I heard her car pull up. I'd been expecting it, but hearing the sound still made my stomach twist. Not with longing, just irritation. She walked in with that face she used to wear after bad news. Soft eyes, trembling lip, mascara pretending to be remorse. She was clutching a small suitcase, probably filled with her essentials, which I guessed included guilt and denial. Jonah, she said, voice breaking, can we please talk? I didn't answer. I just kept flipping pancakes, letting the smell of butter and silence fill the kitchen. She tried again. I made a mistake. Which part? I asked finally. The affair, the lies, or the part where you played supporting actress in a federal investigation? She winced. You don't understand. I never meant for any of this. No. I cut in. You never thought any of this would catch up to you. Big difference. I plated a pancake and slid it onto her side of the counter. Eat. You'll need energy for all that apologizing. She shook her head. Jonah, please. I still love you. I laughed, an ugly sound even to my own ears. You love the version of me that believed you. That guy's gone. This one prefers reality. She sat down, tears rolling silently. You're so cold. Cold, I said, leaning on the counter. No, I'm just not burning anymore. You used up all the fire. That shut her up. For a few minutes, She just sat there, watching me like maybe she could rewind time with enough staring. Finally, she said, "He told me he loved me. He said he'd leave his wife." I snorted so hard I almost choked on coffee. Classic line. Did he also tell you he invented honesty? Her face crumpled, but I didn't stop. You gave up a marriage, a life, for a guy who practiced his charm in a mirror. And you thought you were different. Newsflash, everyone who cheats thinks they're special until the sequel hits. She whispered, "I was stupid." "Yep," I said, "but at least you're self-aware now." I opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope, divorce papers. I slid them across the counter. "You can sign these whenever you're ready. I've already had them notarized." She looked at it like it was a bomb. "You've been planning this?" "Since the moment you said, I can explain," and didn't. For the first time, she didn't argue. She just stared down at the papers. "You really hate me now." "No," I said quietly. "If I hated you, you'd still matter." "You don't." Her face broke, but I didn't look away. She eventually picked up the pen and signed. Her hand trembled like she was writing her own obituary. When she was done, she slid the papers back, stood up, and whispered, "I'm sorry." "No, you're sorry you got caught," I said. "But hey, I appreciate the effort." She grabbed her suitcase and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she paused and looked back one last time. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, smirking. "You start over. Maybe with therapy this time. And me? I make more pancakes." The door clicked shut, and just like that, the house was quiet again. Peaceful. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely, it felt earned. The next few days were surreal. Anthony's downfall was everywhere. Memes, think pieces, podcast episodes titled "The Rooftop Scandal," how one man's ego cost him everything. One tweet went viral. "When your side chick becomes your downfall." Hashtag rooftop reefs, hashtag instant karma. People online are cruel, but they're also creative. Someone even remixed his "Let's Raise a Glass to Loyalty" speech into a techno track. It slapped, not gonna lie. Then came the cherry on top. Anthony's wife, Claire Reeves, filed for divorce within 48 hours. TMZ got photos of her leaving their mansion with 2 suitcases and a smile that could light up the city. One headline read, "Reeves left with nothing but regret and frozen assets." I printed that one out and stuck it on my fridge. Motivation, you know? By Friday, Brookstone Dynamics announced his official termination and cooperation with federal investigators. Word in the industry was he'd be facing charges for fraud, embezzlement, and corporate misconduct. In other words, career vaporized. A few smaller outlets even mentioned me by name, the anonymous husband who exposed the truth. Some called me ruthless, others called me a hero. My favorite tweet read, "Jonah Reed turned HR into TMZ and I respect it. I should have framed it." Meanwhile, Mara vanished from social media, deleted everything. Probably somewhere far away, trying to rebuild her image, maybe even convincing herself she'd been a victim too. But I didn't care. I wasn't stalking her pages anymore. I wasn't replaying memories, analyzing what went wrong. I was free from all of it. It's weird, though, freedom isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or marching bands. It's just quiet mornings, strong coffee, and not checking someone else's phone every time it buzzes. I took time off work, claiming personal reasons. Spent mornings at a diner near the river, watching boats drift by and wondering how people manage to stay normal while their worlds implode. The waitress there, Brenda, started saving my usual table and calling me Mr. Peace. I didn't correct her. She said, "You've got the calmest eyes of anyone I've seen." I laughed. "That's not calm, Brenda. That's what happens when you've run out of panic." A week later, Lucas and I met at our favorite bar again. He looked annoyingly smug. "So," he said, "legendary rooftop guy, how's freedom treating you?" I grinned. "Like a vacation without the sunburn." He raised his glass. "You sure you don't miss the drama?" "Lucas," I said, "I lived in a soap opera for 9 years. I'm good with reruns." He laughed. "Fair. Just don't disappear, man. You're too fun when you're plotting." "I'm retired," I said. From revenge, not sarcasm. When I got home that night, I found one last letter in my mailbox. No return address, but I didn't need one to recognize the handwriting. It was from Mara. Inside was a short note. "You were right about everything. I hope someday you can forgive me." I folded it once, tossed it into the fireplace, and watched it burn. Some things deserve closure. Others deserve smoke. Over the next few weeks, the chaos died down. Anthony's trial prep started making headlines, and every article painted him as a cautionary tale. I didn't even have to testify. The evidence was too strong. My attorney, Sharon Wells, called to say, "You could probably sue for emotional distress, you know." I told her, "Sharon," the look on his face when the video played was payment enough. She laughed. "You're more ruthless than I thought." "Nah," I said, "just efficient." One afternoon, while cleaning out the last of Mara's stuff, I found an old photo of us. Young, broke, smiling like we had the world figured out. For a second, I felt that pang of nostalgia. Then I realized nostalgia's just memory wearing perfume. I tossed the photo in the trash and didn't look back. A few days later, Linda called again. "So," she said, "you ready to come back to work? Or should I just give you Anthony's old office?" I laughed. "Wouldn't that be poetic?" She chuckled. "You might actually get that promotion. The board's been impressed by your initiative." I nearly spit out my coffee. "Please tell me you're joking." "Dead serious," she said. "They want someone with integrity. You're the only one left who doesn't have a burner account in the Caymans." And just like that, I got promoted. Not because I was the smartest or the most ambitious, but because I was the last man standing. Life's funny that way. One man's scandal becomes another man's opportunity. That night, I drove past the Bluestone Hotel, the scene of the rooftop circus. It looked peaceful now, lights twinkling like nothing ever happened. I parked for a minute, stepped out, and leaned on the hood of my car. The city hummed around me, indifferent and alive. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I just felt me. I whispered to myself, "You did it." Not because I destroyed someone else, but because I rebuilt myself. And if the universe was listening, I hoped it laughed with me. Because karma? She really does have a wicked sense of humor. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Personally, I prefer mine served hot, fresh off the stove, plated with a side of irony, and garnished with "you really thought I wouldn't find out?" But as it turns out, justice doesn't need seasoning. It's satisfying all by itself. Months after the rooftop fiasco, my life had settled into something dangerously close to peaceful. No more midnight phone checks, no more gaslighting disguised as conversations, no more pretending not to notice the lies that were practically doing cartwheels in my face. The chaos had burned itself out, leaving behind the kind of silence that felt earned. Every now and then, people still whispered about that night. Some called me heartless. Others called me a legend. My personal favorite came from a barista at the cafe near my office who recognized me mid-latte pour and said, "Dude, you're the guy who turned HR into TMZ." I tipped him $10 and said, "Yeah, I like to think of myself as the patron saint of poetic justice." He laughed so hard he almost spilled my drink. Fame wasn't something I wanted, but let's be honest, it was hilarious watching other people make conspiracy videos about your personal life. There were YouTube breakdowns titled "The Rooftop Files," the man who outsmarted corporate America. One even had a dramatic narrator calling me a quiet avenger. I wasn't mad about that one. Anthony Reeves, meanwhile, was enjoying the opposite of peace. The man had lost everything: his job, his reputation, his marriage, and probably his access to luxury body wash. The news showed him leaving a courthouse looking like someone who'd just been told deodorant was a privilege. The FBI had charged him with fraud, embezzlement, and something about falsified expense accounts. I didn't even understand half the legal terms, but they all sounded expensive. When the reporters shouted questions at him, he did what all guilty people do: blamed systematic mismanagement. Translation: I got caught, but I'm allergic to accountability. His lawyers tried to spin it, but good luck selling that when half the country has seen you starring in a hotel highlight reel with your employee. As for Mara, she vanished from the city. Rumor had it she moved back in with her cousin in Florida, which felt poetic in its own way. Florida, where bad decisions go to tan. She deleted all her social media and resurfaced weeks later under a new profile picture, a sunset with an inspirational quote about growth. The irony nearly broke the internet. Friends sent it to me like it was breaking news. "You see this?" Lucas texted, attaching the post. "She's reborn." I replied, "Yeah, as what?" "A cautionary tale." He sent a laughing emoji. I wasn't angry anymore, though. Anger's heavy, and I'd carried enough of it to last 2 lifetimes. These days, I woke up early, brewed coffee that didn't taste like resentment, and actually enjoyed mornings. The house was mine now, officially, legally, spiritually. I'd repainted the walls, got new furniture, even replaced the bed. It wasn't about erasing her. It was about reclaiming space. Funny thing, though, the house sounded bigger when it was empty, but somehow quieter, too. Peaceful. My friends started calling me Zen Jonah, which was accurate if your definition of Zen includes petty satisfaction and bourbon. Work changed, too. After Anthony's downfall, the board at Brookstone restructured everything. They cleaned house, literally. Entire departments got new heads. Guess who they offered the interim director position to? Yep, me. I almost laughed when HR called. Jonah, we think you'd be perfect for this role. You've shown remarkable leadership. Leadership? I'd expose corruption, not run a seminar. But hey, if the company wanted to mistake vengeance for management, who was I to correct them? I accepted. I figured it was poetic justice for every time I'd sat in meetings listening to Anthony talk about vision, while probably texting my wife under the table. My first day in his old office felt surreal. His nameplate was gone, the desk cleaned out, but the ghost of arrogance lingered in the air. I opened the blinds, let sunlight spill in, and smiled. Guess who's loyal now? I muttered. Lucas dropped by later with lunch and smirked. So, how does it feel sitting in the big chair? Like karma gave me a promotion, I said. Think I should sage the place? He nodded. Definitely. And maybe burn a photo of him just to make sure he doesn't haunt your spreadsheets. Outside work, I started rebuilding myself. Not the polite, people-pleasing version, but the unapologetic one. I joined a gym, bought a motorcycle I didn't need, started cooking again. Turns out, I'm a pretty decent chef when I'm not distracted by emotional disasters. I even started volunteering at a local mentorship program for young professionals. One of them asked me, "What's your biggest life lesson, Mr. Reed?" I said, "Trust, but keep the receipts." They thought it was a metaphor. It wasn't. Then there were the nights when I'd drive by the Bluestone Hotel just to see it glowing against the skyline. The same rooftop where my life had detonated now looked peaceful from below. Sometimes, I'd park across the street, lean on the hood of my car, and listen to the city hum. I'd imagine some new group of executives up there, drinking, laughing, pretending to be loyal. I'd chuckle and say to myself, may your secrets have good lighting. Because the truth is, everyone thinks they're untouchable until someone like me decides to bring a folder to the party. A few months later, I ran into someone unexpected, Claire Reeves, Anthony's ex-wife. It was at a charity gala my new boss insisted I attend, because apparently networking is good for optics. She spotted me at the bar, walked straight over, and said, "You're Jonah, right?" "Depends," I said. "Am I in trouble?" She laughed, sharp, elegant, unbothered. "Not at all. I've been wanting to thank you." I blinked. "Thank me." "For exposing him," she said. "You did what I never could. You freed me from that man without me lifting a finger." She raised her glass. "To poetic justice." I clinked mine against hers. "To freedom," I said. We ended up talking the rest of the night, about life, karma, the stupidity of trusting narcissists in suits. She had this grace about her, the kind that comes from surviving hell and still looking good afterward. When the event ended, she handed me her card and said, "If you ever need a reminder that not all exes are disasters, call me." I didn't that night, but a week later, I did. Sometimes justice comes with second chances, too. Meanwhile, Anthony's trial was the gift that kept on giving. The media dubbed it the boardroom betrayal. Every day brought new revelations. Offshore accounts, forged signatures, hush payments. Watching it unfold felt like binge-watching Karma's best season. The prosecution used some of the same files I'd sent as evidence. When the judge asked where the documents originated, the prosecutor said, "A confidential whistleblower." Confidential, my ass. Half the city knew. Still, hearing it framed like that made me grin. Anthony pleaded guilty to reduced charges, probably hoping to cut his losses. He got 5 years. Not long enough, but long enough for me to sleep well at night. The day of his sentencing, I poured myself a drink, toasted the TV, and whispered, "See you on LinkedIn, buddy." Lucas texted 5 minutes later, 5 years. Justice with a side of orange jumpsuit. I replied, "Hope he likes government-issued cologne." Life didn't become perfect after that. It just became real. There were still bills, traffic, bad days, and moments where I caught myself wondering how everything might have been if Mara had chosen differently. But those moments passed fast. I didn't live there anymore. I lived in the present, sarcastic, content, and at peace with the chaos that led me here. Sometimes, when people asked what really happened, I'd shrug and say, a couple of idiots tried to write me out of my own story. I just took the pen back. A few months later, I got an email from a journalist asking if I'd like to do an interview about my experience. They said it could help others going through betrayal. I stared at the message for a while before replying. Tell them to buy a folder and keep their dignity. Works every time. They never followed up. Probably for the best. I wasn't interested in being anyone's inspiration. I was just a man who learned that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Sometimes I think back to that night on the rooftop. The gasps, the panic, the chaos. It should have been traumatic, but weirdly, it feels cinematic now. Like watching a movie where you already know the ending. The villain gets exposed, the fool gets wise, and the hero doesn't ride into the sunset. He just walks away quietly, humming to himself, because peace doesn't need applause. One evening, months after it all, I found myself at the same rooftop bar again. Not for revenge this time, just curiosity. The view was still stunning. The city lights blinked like secrets waiting to be told. The bartender recognized me instantly. You're that guy, he said. The one with the folder. I laughed. That's me. He poured me a whiskey on the house. You know, he said, no one's ever thrown a party quite like that since. Good, I said. One rooftop apocalypse per lifetime's enough. As I stood there looking out over the skyline, I realized something important. Justice doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it's just the quiet satisfaction of knowing you survived, learned, and came out sharper. Mara was gone. Anthony was paying his dues, and I was still here, still standing, still smiling, still sarcastic. Not broken, not bitter, just free. I finished my drink, left a tip big enough to make Karma proud, and walked toward the elevator. Before the doors closed, I glanced back at the view one last time and thought, betrayal doesn't destroy people. It just unmasks them. And if the universe was keeping score, I'd finally even mine. Justice didn't wear a badge that night. It wore my calm smile, my cheap suit, and that infamous black folder. And the thing about justice? When it finally shows up, it always looks exactly like the person everyone underestimated. That person, as it turns out, was me.